They support what is being said. So, are you guys ready? Maybe some people are still nervous. They did not prepare. You're both ready. Okay. So, we're going to hand over to our adjudicators who are going to take us through the processes, the legalities, the formalities of the debate. Handing over to my board.
As it is of the House, good evening to our fellow teams, to our fellow speakers, and also to our adjudicators in the House at large. Today's motion is quite an interesting one, but without wasting any time, I'm just going to lay some House rules. So each speaker will be given 5 minutes to speak. From minute 1 to minute 4, you will have time to make your points and your submissions, and during that time a POI may be raised. A POI is a point of information, and the POI is raised from the other team. You have the liberty to decide to whether you're going to take the POI or not. But just a head note, from last week's debate or from the past 2 weeks, we have noticed that a lot of the teams, if not actually everyone, they reject the POIs during their submissions. So, in as much as it may be strategic for you to not take any POI, also consider if the POI is in relation to the points you're going to raise, then you can answer the question right there. If no POI will be answered, this will be the adjudicators will give an opportunity to every single team member to raise their POI if it was not answered during the discussion. From minute 1 to minute 4, your timekeeper, adjudicator Madlabeng, will inform you whether or not your time is up, and then you will have from minute 4 to minute 5, you will then have time to wrap up your submissions. During minute 4 and minute 5, no speaker may raise any POI. That's when you have to conclude. And at minute 5, when your time is up, then you will get a double clap. Am I correct?
Get a
time's up. Yes, and before I proceed, I also want to just introduce our adjudicators. We have adjudicator Mercy in the house. And then we have adjudicator Madlabeng. Hi, adjudicator Madlabeng. Then we have adjudicator Mike with us. And then we have adjudicator Kawundu, that is terrible. And we also have Osana in the house. Hello, Osana. When I announced the one adjudicator there, I wanted to they are married, so it's And then I will be the 5th adjudicator. So I'm going to hand over to our speakers who will then start with the opening of the debate. Some house rules: when you are impressed with the point that's raised, you do this. You don't make noise, you don't clap, you don't make any weird sounds whatsoever. Please respect every single speaker that's speaking. And to our speakers as well, be kind with your voice and project so that everyone can hear you. Over to Team. Okay. Team who?
Can you do this? It's okay. This. Yeah, this. This. Yeah.
Good evening, adjudicators and non-guests. Today we stand firmly in the proposition to support the motion. Religion and culture weaponize marriage to oppress and limit the rights of women and place crippling pressure on men in society. Let me begin with a simple question. If marriage is all blessings, why do so many people experience it as pressure, silence, obligation instead of freedom? We are told marriage is loud, about unity, about sacred commitment. But today we ask you to look beyond the romantic story and examine the structure. Because marriage is not just personal, it is institutional. And institutional distribute to power. Denzel Galileo explains that many societies operate through what she calls patriarchal burdens, where people adjust to inequalities because system gives them few safe alternatives. Marriage becomes one of the central places where inequality is organized, normalized, and placed down. This is not about one religion, not about one culture, not about one country. Across history, across region, similar patterns appear. In classical Hindu religion transition, women were described as needing men guardianship throughout life. Family system were structured around the three obedience to the father, husband, and the son. Many interpretations within Abrahamic tradition will frame male household leadership as morally expected. Different beliefs, different history, but the same structure outcomes. Marriage becomes a hierarchy, not a negotiation between equals. Marriage regulated inherits property, lineage, and sexuality. In other words, marriage functional as a social system to maintain order, not just affection. Fatima Menes argues that in many societies, women's sexuality was seen as a social disruptor and therefore tightly controlled through marriage. Marriage was not union, it was regulation. And here's the key: when the control is presented as tradition, it feels natural. When it feels as God's design, it feels unquestionable. That is why we mean by weaponization. Not violence with weapons, but control with values. Pressure with praise, obligation disguised as virtue. And this system does not only shape women. R.W. Connell, in her theory of hegemonic masculinity, explains how society constructs an ideal man, dominant, emotional, controlled, financially stable. Marriage becomes the stage where the ideal man must be performed. So women are often expected to sacrifice autonomy, men are expected to sacrifice emotional freedom. Both are combined, just in different ways. This is why we are clear: we are not attacking faith, we are not attacking culture. We are questioning what happens when an institution becomes more protected than the people inside of them. Because when roles are sacred, leaving them becomes shameful. When endurance is called virtue, suffering becomes normal. When provision defines manhood, failures become humiliation. Something meant for companionship becomes a system that regulates identity, behavior, and worth. Our team will show you how this operates globally across culture and religion, within South Africa, cultural marriage practices, and within religious teaching that shape marital goals. But before evidence, understand the core idea. We're not debating individual marriages. We are debating the structure that tells people who they must be inside marriage and who must sacrifice. If marriage were only about love, it will adapt to human dignity. But when marriage protects hierarchy instead of equality, it stops being partnership and becomes a system of control. That is why we are proudly stand in support of this motion.
Just for your comfort, may you please be seated so that your laptop is not disturbed.
Honorable adjudicators, fellow debaters, and the House at large, I greet you. Standing before you, sitting before you, is Melissa from Team Liberty, and we today firmly oppose the motion. We oppose the motion because it fundamentally misidentifies the source of oppression in society. It assumes that religion, culture, and marriage are deliberately designed as tools to harm women and burden men. This assumption is false. Marriage is a near universal human institution found across cultures and religion. Justina Haller says, if marriage itself were inherently oppressive, then oppression would be universal and unavoidable. Yet, history and lived reality show us variation, reform, and progress. This tells us that harm does not come from the marriage itself, but from the unequal power, weak legal systems, economic instability, and the abuse of authority. Before advancing further, we would like to clearly define the terms of this debate. By religion, we refer to the organized belief system that provide moral frameworks and ethical guidance for human relationships. Culture refers to shared values, norms, and tradition developed within society over time. Marriage is a social and legal union intended to promote mutual responsibility, cooperation, and stability. Oppression refers to the systematic denial of rights, dignity, and agency through social or institutional power. These definitions matter because the motion requires proof of intentional harm harm embedded in the institution itself, not isolated cases of misuse. Our central position is this: religion and culture do not weaponize marriage. People do. They do so through selective interpretation, patriarchal control, and the misuse of authority. To blame marriage as an institution is to confuse structure and abuse, and to treat the symptom while ignoring the disease.
All in the house.
Sorry. Where women are oppressed and men are overburdened, the root cause is power imbalance, economic pressure, and lack of accountability, not the existence of marriage or belief systems. Honorable adjudicators, our case will be advanced by 4 speakers. Our second speaker will challenge the core assumption of this motion by showing that oppression originates from power structures and institutional failure, not from marriage, religion, or culture, and will demonstrate that religious teachings, when interpreted holistically and responsibly, promote mutual responsibility, dignity, and protection rather than domination. Our third speaker will address the claim that marriage places crippling pressure on men, proving that these pressures stem from economic systems and social expectations, not religious doctrine. Our fourth speaker will argue that culture is dynamic and capable of reform, and that harmful practices represent cultural failure, not cultural incest. Finally, our fifth speaker will synthesize our argument, reboot the opposition's framing, and show why accountability and reform, not the criticism of marriage, religion, and culture, are not true paths to justice and equality. For these reasons, on logic, principle, and evidence, Team Liberty proudly and firmly oppose the motion. Thank you.
Greetings to the members of the House and the honorable adjudicators. My name is Leanne Haramsa, and today we stand to propose the motion. As the first speaker for the proposition, I will be expanding more on the global cultural and religious patterns that we see in marriages. I will show you that this problem is not about individual beliefs, but about systems, social, religious, and cultural systems that shape marriage into a structure that restricts women and burdens men. Marriage is used to restrict women's autonomy. Across many traditions, marriage is not a partnership, it is a hierarchy. Religious teachings and cultural norms repeatedly position the man as the head of the household and the woman as the obedient supporter. This is not symbolic. It has real consequences. Girls are raised to believe that a good wife serves, a good wife submits, a good wife tolerates silence. From childhood, they are conditioned to view themselves as secondary, less capable, and dependent on men for leadership. When obedience becomes a duty, autonomy becomes a sin. Women are also valued mainly through roles, not individuality. The obedient wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law, the self-sacrificing mother. If she fails in any of these roles, her state disappears. Even in widely accepted interpretations of Christian scripture, wives are instructed to be submissive in many ways to their husbands. The hierarchical idea positions women as followers and the men as decision makers, creating an unequal power structure that limits women's rights and opportunities. The only point when women in patriarchal cultures gain any form of social authority is through motherhood. But even this power is limited, extended only to their children, not to society at large. Outside of motherhood, women are rarely placed in positions of influence, providing that the system uplifts the role of a mother, not the woman herself. Culture tells her to endure, to pray harder, to be patient, instead of recognizing her right to safety and independence. Wives are seen as second in the family household, only to their husband. This suggests that men are the forefront of Christianity. This urbanization where marriage becomes a cage disguised as virtue. Endurance as holiness. Socialist Denis Cambiotti called the system the patriarchal bargain, where women accept inequality as a survival strategy because they have been taught that suffering is honorable. In parts of the Middle East and South Asia, young wives accept strict obedience with the hope that they will gain respect later on as mother-in-law. And tragically, once they gain this limited power, many become the enforcers of the same oppressive rulers they suffered under. Even in the Western modern trade wife movement, romanticizes the 1950s style female submission. Religion and culture take woman's silence and rebranded as holiness, purity, or humility. This is not empowerment, it's conditioning. This motion does not only protect women, it also recognizes that men are trapped too. Be a man, don't cry. Real men don't show weakness. And also using the South African famous phrase, "You don't must."
Speaker number 2, there's a POI. Would you like to take it?
I'd like to reject the POI.
Reject it.
These ideas follow them into adulthood, where men are expected to be the sole provider, protector, and emotional rock of the family. Across Asia and many regions, a man is not seen as socially complete until he can afford the expensive requirements of marriage, such as high bride houses, dowries, or what we call lobola in South Africa. This forces many into financial strain or even marriage they do not want, simply to prove their masculinity. Men who cannot afford marriage face social stigma, isolation, and exclusion. Their worth is tied to their wallet, not their humanity. At the same time, men are pressured to suppress all vulnerability. If they express fear, stress, sadness, they are seen as weak. Marriage becomes a performance of strength, not a partnership of equals. The proposition is clear. Religion and culture do not simply shape marriage, they weaponize it. They create a system where women are restricted, men are overburdened, and both are pressured to conform to the roles that limits their freedom and well-being. Thank you.
Yes, let's go. As the opposition, we acknowledge that women have been oppressed and means burdened within religious and cultural marriages, both historically and today. However, acknowledging harm is not the same as assigning malicious intent to marriage itself. My name is Weaponised, and I'm the seventh speaker who will be taking you through reasons why marriage is not a good cause. As my partner Gai has defined, weaponized is defined as deliberately use of something for harm. Is that what marriage is? Obviously not. If marriage itself was oppressive, then all married people would be oppressed. But again, it's not true. So let us focus on the symptoms. But let us not focus on the symptoms, but dive into the root cause. First, we'll be looking into the power structures and the institutional failures. In the past, apartheid was a racial capitalist system enforced by the law. Women, especially black women, were legally marginalized. Laws such as the Population Registration Act, Group Area Act, passed laws controlled where women could live, work, and move. Black women were treated as dependents of men or the state, not as citizens. These legal systems oppressed women regardless of marital status, proving marriage was not the root cause. Through value education, black women were deliberately denied quality education. This limited their access to skilled employment and leadership roles. When women lack education, power imbalances deepens inside families and society as large. Marriage did not create this inequality. It merely reflected an already existing unequal system. The extension of past laws to women in the 1950s directly controlled women's mobility and employment. The famous 1956 Women's March proves women were resisting state oppression, not marriage. So what am I saying by this? Under apartheid, women were oppressed by laws, economics, and political exclusion long before marriages entered into the picture. The rights of a woman were already limited and they reflected in the marriage. Now let's look at today. Post-apartheid, South Africa remains one of the most unequal societies in the world. Women are overrepresented in low-paying, informal, and insecure work. This results in oppression. So oppression exists whether a woman is married or not. So gender-based violence remains alarmingly high. Abuse occurs in dating relationships and single households. Again, showing that marriage is not the central cause. Oppression already existed, even before there was marriage.
Is it clear?
Yeah.
You said apartheid created laws that oppresses women, and apartheid was formed through religion. So actually, you're saying religion is the one which was formed to the one creating those laws to oppress women.
Okay. And is the motion talking about marriage or talking about religion?
Talking about marriage, and those laws were enforced into those marriages.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that because of the societal expectations and also because of the religion, right? All the people that get into the marriages are not as a result, they are not using marriage as a weapon. But because of already what is being expected of them, they enter into the marriage already like that. So it's not the marriage that's the problem, but it's the standard around that creates marriage to be used as a weapon. So, ladies and gentlemen, listen carefully to this. Marriage functions within an equal system. Removing marriage will not have automatically removed oppression, showing that oppression is existing regardless of marriage, and therefore bad things that happen in marriage are not because of marriage, but because of individuals who have entered subscribed to the societal standards. If religion teachings were interpreted well, they will promote mutual responsibility rather than denomination. As the first speaker defined religion as a belief system, let us look at the belief system, right? And when Ephesians talks about marriage, it says both women and men are supposed to submit under Christ. Then continue to say women must submit under the man. If we only look into the second part of submission, we miss the mark. Secondly, if we interpret submission in terms of the world, we also will miss the mark. So all believers need to first submit to Christ, establishing
just a note to our speakers, if your opponent takes a POI and you please just stand up instead of sitting because everyone else cannot see. So just if your POI is accepted, stand up and then make your point and then the person can respond. You may proceed.
Greetings to the members of the House and honorable judicators. So, the motion of today is religion and culture have weaponized marriage with the intent to oppress and limit the rights of women and to place crippling pressure on men in society. So I will be focusing on the South African cultural practices and marriage. I stand to demonstrate how South African cultural marriage practices, particularly lobola and gender expectations, function as institutional tools that subordinate women and place crippling pressure on men. While culture is often defended as sacred, its patriarchal application has turned marriage into a mechanism of control rather than partnership. Lobola and gender power dynamics. Lobola remains central to marriage in South Africa. Though often described as a symbolic, research shows it as structure of power. Anthropological scholarship by Adam Cooper
established a bright wealth historically transferred a woman's reproductive and labor rights to her husband's lineage. Marriage, therefore, did not simply unite families, it transferred authority over women. This persists today. A qualitative study by researchers at the University of the Witwatersrand found that lobola often reduces women's autonomy in mobility, employment, and household decision making. As stated in the cited paragraph, the woman is expected to be submissive because lobola has been paid. She is regarded as property of her husband's family. Public health research indexed by PubMed in 2021 further shows that lobola creates perceived ownership, making it harder for women to leave abusive marriages due to expectations of repayment. Sambe in 2023 confirmed that high price
POI.
Okay, take it.
So my question is, why do unmarried women and men face similar economic pressures?
Which economic pressures?
Opposition, please clarify your POI. Okay, you can continue.
Sambe in 2023 confirmed that high bride price contributes to domestic violence, poverty, dehumanization of women, and divorce. Marriage begins with a transaction, and transactions create power imbalances. Cultural expectations of married women. Cultural norms place unequal burdens on married women, demanding obedience, fertility, and endurance. A study is published in HTS Theology Studies.
Another POI. Rejected.
A study published in HTS Theology Studies documents how marital endurance, even under abuse, is framed as virtues of womanhood. There will be a famous saying, patriarchal household hierarchies grant men authority over finances, movement, and sexuality. Practices around infertility illustrates this control. Oath in 2017 notes that women may be pressured into sexual relations with their husband's relatives to preserve lineage. Like, if I die, I have my younger brother have to now marry you in order to continue the lineage. When women are accused of infidelity, Chauke in 2021 observed that they face physical abuse, humiliation, and divorce. While men committing similar acts rarely face equivalent consequences. While in 2023 further highlights how wife beating has become normalized despite marriage being revered. Marriage thus governs women's bodies, labor, and silence. Expectations of married men, masculinity, and mental health.
Time's up, speaker.
Oh.
Honorable adjudicators, ladies and gentlemen, as part of the opposition, I'll be arguing that the pressure men face is not caused by marriage, religion, or culture, but by the economic systems and the societal expectations of masculinity. While the motion claims that marriage puts crippling pressure on men, we argue that the real source of pressure are unfair economic systems and rigid social norms. not the institution of marriage itself. Let me explain why. So according to PubMed article, across the world, men face a breadwinner expectation. The idea that a man must earn, provide, and succeed financially. This norm existed long before modern marriage systems, and it applies to unmarried men as well, as such as married men. Studies show that men experience greater stress when unemployment or poverty prevents them from fulfilling these social imposed roles. In many countries, a man without a job is considered a failure, regardless of whether he is married or not. The pressure comes from society, not from the vows taken in the marriage. It is society's idea of the male breadwinner, not the institution of marriage, that creates this pressure. Furthermore, traditional masculinity norms restrict men's choices. Research shows that norms of toughness, self-reliance, and emotional control push men into certain careers even when these jobs are declining or becoming insecure. Men are penalized socially if they take roles considered feminine or less prestigious, increasing both economic and emotional stress in men. For example, a man may work in the social services or healthcare, but society tells him that's not a woman's job. This stress is created by social expectations, not marriage. If someone says men should just find another job, the response is simple. Society doesn't allow flexibility. Men are trapped by norms, not by marriage. And according to OECD article written in 2020, social pressure also harms men's mental and physical health. Masculinity norms discourage men from asking for help, even when they are unemployed or struggling financially. Studies show that men under economic pressure are more likely to experience depression, anxiety, and even higher suicide rates. Imagine a man struggling to provide during his recession. If he can't show vulnerability, he suffers silently. Marriage itself is not the problem. The problem is the expectation that men must always be strong and self-sufficient, and they mustn't speak when they have a problem.
There's a PR. Would you like to take it or not?
The real culprit is economic systems, not marriage. Men feel pressure because capitalist competition, unemployment, and inequality. Socialist Ryan Connell calls this hegemonic masculinity, which links male value to income and power. Religion and culture, in contrast, often promotes shared responsibility, family support, and community aid, all of which can reduce pressure on men. In communities where families and neighbors share resources, men feel supported. Marriage in these cases becomes a partnership and not a burden. If someone says marriage still forces men to pay bride prices or support families, the response to that even is that bride price or family support is economic and not religious. The institution of marriage can't exist without oppression if laws and culture promote fairness. So the men's so-called crippling pressure is not caused by marriage, religion, or culture. It comes from economic inequality, employment, rigid gender norms, and society association of male value with income and provision. Reforming these systems and challenging harmful.
Since you have another PR.
You are speaking of how pressure is placed on men because of social expectations, and this shaped by religion and culture.
I don't believe they are shaped by religion and culture. They are shaped by the government itself or the mentality of the people around us, not because of religion. If a Christian does not believe, he doesn't know about a lot of what's going on in the Bible, or doesn't know if the Bible is against whatever that you're saying. So if a non-believer right now, even non-believers right now, they still believe that men are or are not oppressed by those religions and the social. To continue, reforming these systems and challenging harmful masculinity norms reduces pressure and allows marriage to be a supportive partnership, not a source of stress. So the problem is not marriage, religion, or culture.
it is society's economic systems and rigid expectations of men. If we want to protect men, we fix the system and not blame the marriage they're in. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, adjudicators and fellow panelists. I will be the third speaker for Team Town Park. My name is Joy. I want to start by taking us back home. There's a saying in my language that "Mwasati iwukuyo khomela bayeni." Now what this means is that a woman is like a chicken kept for visitors. This proverb captures something powerful about how society prepares women for marriage from a very young age. It seems that from a young age, women are raised to see marriage as their ultimate goal, not as something they choose for themselves, but as destiny they must prepare for. When society convinces women that their worth depends on marriage, control over their lives starts in. Olive Umaraya, a feminist from Rwanda, writes in an article, "Is marriage a punishment for women?" That many women grow up believing that the value of a woman is in having a husband. You do all it takes to keep it. This shows that this is not an issue where I grew up. It's an issue for women all over the world. Today I will be speaking on some ways religion and culture weaponize marriage in South Africa. Firstly, male spiritual leadership. In many Christian churches in South Africa, men are taught from a young age that they are the spiritual heads of the household. This idea is often justified using selective readings of the Bible, such as Ephesians 5 verse 22. Critics often focus only on the verse that says, a woman should submit to her husband as she submits to the Lord. Husbands use the idea of submission to control their wives. Boys are socialized from a young age to see themselves as superior to women, to have their voices prioritized, and to dismiss what women say. Disagreement from women is often framed as disobedience to God. Women's right to make decisions about money, children, or even their own lives is limited. At the same time, men are trapped by these expectations. They're expected to lead, provide, and maintain spiritual authority. If they are struggling emotionally, spiritually, or financially, they are seen as failing not just as husbands, but as men of faith. Scholars writing in Verba and Ecclesia explain that although male spiritual leadership is described as loving leadership, in practice, it creates a hierarchy that silences women and prejudices men. In other words, marriage becomes a tool of control. It elevates men above women while burdening men with impossible expectations, weaponizing both sides. Secondly, marriage is treated as while divorce is discouraged. Marriage is holy, patient, permanent, and ordained by God. While divorce is seen by many others as moral failure, even when the marriage is no longer led by God. When women are unhappy, unsafe, or abused, they are often told, pray more, submit more, God hates divorce. As a result, many women stay in harmful marriages because leaving would mean shame, rejection, and being labeled ungodly. Marriage becomes a trap instead of a choice. Men are also affected. Research in HTF...
Pure Iris.
Yeah, as we were talking about the chickens.
What in the house?
So as we were talking about the chickens, why, if marriage is inherently bad, why has it evolved across generations?
I never say marriage is bad. If you look at the motion is saying culture and religion has been used, is weaponizing marriage. So people under culture and religion are choosing to weaponize something God has created to be good and true and to be loving.
You're not here to proceed, speaker.
Research in HTS theology studies shows that men experience deep shame when marriages fail because divorce is framed as spiritual failure. This leads to emotional stress, anger, and silence rather than healing. So the idea of scarred marriage ends up protecting the institution, not the people. Thirdly, the gender roles taught in church. Churches often promote strict roles.
Sorry, speaker. There's another PI. Would you like to take it? Or
Churches often promote strict roles. Women must submit, nurture, and sacrifice, while men must lead, provide, and control. African theologians like Isabella Pira argue that these teachings tie women's worth to obedience, marriage rather than their humanity and autonomy. For women, submission means being taught to enjoy instead of speak, being expected to serve without recognition, being valued only as wives and mothers. For men, leadership means being taught that they must always be strong, being expected to provide financially even when unemployed, being blamed when the family struggles, never asking for help, never crying. In this way, church gender roles burdens men and limit women, turning marriage into another tool of pressure rather than partnership.
Good day, adjudicators and fellow debaters. My name is Nozota, and I speak on behalf of Liberty Team opposing today's motion. We agree that religion and culture influence marriage, but we reject the claim that they inherently weaponize it to oppress women and burden men. I want to emphasize that culture is not static, it evolves over time, and this evolution shows that cultural norms around marriage adapt to promote greater equality and flexibility. Culture is not fixed, it changes as society grows, that is in terms of UNESCO source. History shows us clearly that marriage did not create inequality, it reflected the unequal systems that already existed in society. Women historically had limited access to education, financial independence, and leadership opportunity. Marriage simply operated within these unequal structures. It was not the origin of them. In other words, marriage became the stage where inequality played out, but it was not the scriptwriter of oppression itself. And this distinction matters clearly. If inequality existed before modern marriage systems, then removing or attacking marriage would not automatically produce equality. The real issue was broader social exclusion.
Sorry about that.
I would like to reject the POI. What is even more powerful is that women did not only fight against culture and religion, they also fought within them. Historically, women used religious spaces, cultural structures, and community organizations as platforms for resistance and empowerment. We saw women leading, organizing historic actions like the 1956 Women's March to the Union buildings. This proves something very important, that if religion and culture were purely weapons designed only to oppress, they could not also become tools of resistance and empowerment. As society evolved, so did marriage itself. When women entered the workspace, accessed higher education, and gained legal recognition, marriage shifted dramatically. It moved from being a survival structure where women depended economically on men into a partnership model based on shared responsibility, mutual support, and joint decision-making. This transformation reduced sole financial pressure on men and increased urgency for women inside marriage. Instead of oppression, we are now increasingly see cooperation. Instead of limitation, we see shared power. I would like to reject the POI. Let us be clear with an analogy. A weapon is designed to only harm. A tool is designed to serve a function, but it cannot be misused. Religion and marriage aim to provide structure, responsibility, family stability, and community. They can be abused by individuals, yes, but they can also be capable of reform, reinterpretation, and empowerment. If a system can evolve, self-correct, and empower,
it cannot be inherently oppressive. This philosophical reality alone collapses the motion's foundation. Honorable House, if marriage has already transformed from survival to partnership, from dependency to shared power, from silence to choice, then I ask, if culture has evolved this much already, why should we assume it cannot continue to evolve toward greater equality?
Our last speakers, no pure eyes may be raised, as this is the conclusion from both the teams'
To conclude our argument, we stand in favor of this motion of how religion and culture weaponizes marriage to oppress and limit the rights of women and put crippling pressure on men in society. This is seen in culture globally, where women are stripped of their autonomy. And this is also seen in the misuse and interpretation of certain religions, Christianity being an example, that women are merely followers of their husbands and have to be submissive and obedient. Through our arguments, we have clearly conveyed the effect of religion and that culture has on men and women, not being able to show on men across the world, not being able to show weakness and vulnerability as their role in marriage, and men having crippling pressure for men having crippling pressure and the financial strain across cultures around the world. Further, in the South African context, through our second speaker, we've seen that culturally, the transactions of lobola, power imbalances arise from the beginning. It has the effect of transferring the woman's authority over to the husband's, reducing autonomy, decision-making, and mobility. Furthermore, through the different studies, we see that women are often expected to endure marriage, even if harmful to herself, showing how culturally the meaning of marriage has been used not to promote unity, but rather to weaponize women and oppressing and limiting their rights of what they can do in their marriage. The pressure on men is also undeniable. In order to marry, they need to be in a specific financial standing, which is not always possible, and subsequently, they receive social stigma, familial rejection, and isolation, affecting them psychologically, socially, and emotionally. Addressing how the first speaker of the opposing team focused on apartheid. However, apartheid went in force in 1949, used Christianity, a religion, to enforce a regime, and through which laws were formed, showing that religion indirectly influenced how marriage was done. Our third speaker should read how religion in our country and its role, and how religion in our country, specifically Christianity, which is said to be practiced by more than 80% of the population, so show how scripture is misused for wives to be submissive and submissive to the head of the home, their husband, creating an idea that husbands can control their wives. And for men, they need to maintain spiritual authority that they cannot afford, therefore, to struggle spiritually, emotionally, and financially. And if they do so, they have failed their role in their marriage. Furthermore, religion has also put a shadow on divorce, making marriage, I reiterate, not a trap, but a choice. Through gender roles, religion has taught women to endure, not to speak, submit, not to question, and men always having to be strong, never to ask for help, never cry, always provide, and remain a spiritual authority in their marriage. All across the world and in our country, young men and women, boys and girls, have been exposed to these repeated cycles of how religion and culture weaponize marriage. And through the pressure of culture and religion, the weaponizing of this marriage is then passed on through to the next generation. Therefore, as stated earlier, culture and religion does not shape marriage, but weaponizes it to oppress and limit the rights of women and puts crippling pressure on men in society. I thank you.
To our adjudicators, fellow debate members, and the House at large, greetings to you all. My name is Pilasan and I'll be the last speaker from Team Liberty. Ladies and gentlemen, the proposition wants you to believe that religion and culture weaponize marriage, that it is designed to oppress women and crush men. But the reality is far more complicated than that. We have shown clearly that oppression does not originate from marriage itself,
Marriage exists across societies, across history, and across continents. If it were inherently oppressive, then oppression would be universal and unavoidable, just as our first speaker from Team Liberty has elaborated. However, it's not. What creates oppression is unequal power systems, mainly political, economic, and social structures that allow abuse to thrive. During apartheid, for example, black men were oppressed by the state, yet the same state legally empowered them within marriage to control their wives. This was not a product of marriage, religion, or culture, but a distortion imposed by power. The abuse flowed downward through generations, but the root cause was structural inequality. Oppression travels through institutions, not through marriage itself. Culture too is often blamed, but there is a misunderstanding in this. Culture is living, dynamic, and adaptable. Harmful practices are not culture itself. They are distortions, frozen, or manipulations by those in power. Pre-colonial African societies, for example, often allowed women to be economically independent and be in authority. Yoruba market women in Nigeria control trade and prices, and Derele and Zulu women own cattle, which is livestock, here in the southern of Africa, and advise some countries. This shows that African culture did not inherently oppress women. It was flexible and allowed female authority. When culture is oppressive today, it reflects the misuse of tradition, not its essence. UNESCO reminds us that culture is constantly evolving, capable to reform and be corrected, just as our second speaker has elaborated. We have also rebooted the proportions attempts to simplify the issue of the claim that buy price puts pressure on men, but we show that its original purpose was to unite families, not for one to take ownership of the other person. They claim that religion enforces female submission. We showed that authentic religion teaching calls for mutual respect and shared responsibility. They claim that marriage crushes men with creeping pressure. We demonstrated that this is economic and social pressure, unemployment, inequality, and systematic expectations, not marriage itself. When we combine all these points, power structures, drive, oppression, and culture is adaptable, we see a clear picture emerging. Marriage, religion, and culture are not inherently oppressive. They can be misused, yes, but that's not their original design, which is going to be abused. Distortion is not doctrine. Abuse is also not an institution. Marriage is meant to protect, stabilize, and to support. Culture is the capacity to evolve. Religion, when interpreted faithfully, teaches mutuality. The oppression we see reflects societal imbalance, not the moral or social institutions themselves. The motion is overly broad. It generalizes from specific cases of misuse and presents them as evidence of design. It blames marriage, culture, and religion while ignoring deeper systematic causes of inequality. Therefore, for these reasons, we reject this motion. Marriage is not a weapon. Culture is not a chain. Religion is not a tool for oppression. When properly understood and reformed, these institutions uplift society, protect the vulnerable, and promote partnership, not oppression. Ladies and gentlemen, oppression does exist, but it is never inherent to marriage, religion, or culture. It is a symptom of distorted power. We urge you to stand with logic, history, and justice to reject this motion. Thank you.
think let's give our speakers a round of applause. Yes, let's give our speakers a round of applause. Well done, guys. Now we're going to just quickly dismiss our adjudicators unless we have anything else to add. Yes, as they come to the final decision and give us the results of what has happened today. Next, I'm going to call up Pastor Nell, who's going to go through maybe some questions and then call up our next speaker.
We will do no such thing.
But yes, Pastor Nell, everyone.
Alright, guys. Okay, so I'm gonna start with a poem that I read last week. Just the opening part of it. To give you a bit more context of why we are doing what we're doing. We have as every nation, we have the honor and privilege of being on the greatest higher learning institution in Africa and beyond. So this is Wits and UJ for tonight. But this is Wits. Tomorrow, this is Wits. And for us to be able to honor God while we are here, serving Him on this institution, we have to be integrous in how we respond to questions like these. When those who wish to be believers and have questions, ask us the same questions. I said this before, that the Bible says so, it's not going to work anymore. It might have worked when you're in high school or in primary school, but because the Bible says so, it's not going to work. What's going to work is you doing the hard work of knowing why, where, and how the Bible says so. You can't just throw a statement and say because the Bible, and there is no such thing as the Bible says so. Is it Paul? Is it Peter? You know, is it David? You have to be able to speak in a coherent manner. Not because that in itself can change somebody's mind concerning their faith, but because it is honoring to them. If we say we are here to honor God, one of the ways we honor God is by honoring the questions that they have. But, like I've been saying for the past couple of weeks, these are not questions that only pre-believers have. These are questions that people in the church have. We have the same questions, but sometimes we are too fearful to do the hard work of digging deep and knowing what does the word actually say about these questions. Jesus honored people's questions. Jesus mostly interacted with people by even asking them questions. So I'm going to start by asking you guys a question. From what you heard tonight, what does God say to you? It might not be what He's saying to you about marriage, but what is He saying to you about applying your mind to your faith? A lazy application of self to faith will not cut it. I wish I had a hard copy of the Bible, because now I can lift up my phone. This book, pretend I have it. The book does have answers. So yeah, there are answers in this book, and the answers are not for the apostles to find out. They are for the disciples to find out. One of my favorite scriptures in the book of Acts is Acts 8, which says that when the apostles remained, the disciples were scattered like seed. And as they were scattered, they kept on transforming cities. So it was never for the people in the front. And that's what makes that so powerful. That it wasn't people that have studied theology or have done Bible school. It wasn't people that would be able to say that I've been a believer for 10 years. It was students just like you who did the work.
Yeah.
It is possible to do the hard work that is required for you to be able to have real conviction concerning your faith.
Yeah.
Some of the bad choices and decisions that you have made in your life is because you had borrowed conviction, not real conviction. Your parents' conviction is not your conviction. Some of us, some of us don't have a conviction about sex before marriage because it was actually your parents' conviction. It was a youth pastor's conviction. And that's why when a fitting candidate offered their participation in the matter, that's why it was easy for you to drop your standards. Because they were never your standards to start with. And I mentioned that one because it's something that's close to all of us in this room. That sometimes the standards drop, not because something changed in your belief. No, it was never your belief to start with. It was somebody else's belief. It was your youth pastor's belief. Your youth pastor believed that you should be pure. It was never your belief. You never did the hard work that you needed to do to know why you meant to be pure. And some of you were pure because there was nobody offering themselves. And I'm not saying that to be whatever, but some of us, our purity was circumstantial. Some of us, it was a reflection of our insecurities, not our conviction. And that's why, when you got a little bit of a glow up, and the optometrist gave you those glasses, and things switched up, and you knew how to put that eyeliner correctly. And you got that gym membership. That's why it was easy to drop the standard because they were never your standards to start. So even what you call my faith, my walk with God, was never yours to start. It was hot spotted from you. Austin said lukewarm. So this should be a challenge for all of us. There's two groups of people in the Bible that I wanted to highlight tonight. Possibly won't be able to. It is in Acts 17 verse 11. They speak about the Bereans. And referring to the Bereans, it says that they were more noble than those in Thessalonica, for they received the word with great eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see whether these things were so. So they heard the word, but when they went home, they did something more with what they heard. That's what it speaks about the Bereans. But in the Old Testament, there's another group of people that I want you to go look up later in your own time. In 1 Chronicles 12 verse 32, it speaks about the sons of Issachar. It says the sons of Issachar were men who understood the times. So there's an understanding to apply to your belief, to your faith. They understood the times. And it says with knowledge of what Israel should do. They had knowledge. Their chiefs were 200 and all their kinsmen were their command. So they understood that there was an understanding of the questions of the times. There was an understanding of the pressures and the challenges of the times. And they had knowledge. Are you recognizing God's activity in your times? Do you even have a desire to have an understanding of the times? Or have we become so self-absorbed that Christianity is more about what I can get from God? It's more about an ATM transaction that God, give me fees, God, make me pass, God, give me this, God, but you have no understanding. Whatever is happening in the time that you're living in will affect you. Not indirectly, but directly. The spirit of the age, you will internalize it if you do not have a discernment about what it is. The sons of Issachar had an understanding of the times. Understanding the times is not about being relevant and being up to date with the latest trends. No, it's having deep discernment. It's you having studied the scriptures, knowing the Bible addresses what is happening right now concerning gender-based violence. The Bible addresses what is happening right now concerning sexuality. The Bible addresses what is happening right now concerning fees, people not being able to pay. The Bible addresses every single thing concerning what's happening in our time, but we have no understanding of the times. The sons of Issachar had an understanding of the times. The word understanding comes from the word bina, which means insight, a good sense of wisdom to respond properly. And I love this, to respond properly to the law concerning what's happening. They had insight. It means understanding, to be given a revelation as well as its meaning. The meaning of the revelation about what's happening. So the sons of Issachar had an understanding of the times. The poem that I wanted to say, I didn't write it. It says, let the believers think so that thinkers can believe. Let believers think so that thinkers can believe. Once upon a time, believers were thinkers, and thinkers believed. Faith was not devoid of the rational, and the rational was not divorced by the faithful. Let believers think. There's an invitation that God is making to the church. Think again. Do not give shallow social media quotes concerning what's happening in your life. Think once again.
Yes. Come on.
Think once again. Once upon a time, believers were thinkers. And it says that absolutes strutted about the ivory towers without molestation. Truth stood its ground in the debate between life and death. Tolerance of the intolerable did not suffer casualty in the battle of words. Now the shallow graves of the mind line the paths of believers on the narrow path. Those mindful of the celestial are drained of depth. Those who are mindful of heavenly things are now drained of depth. They quote their favorite scriptures. Jeremiah 29. Nazo, yeah. Psalm 23. There's nothing wrong with that. But it can be a misuse. It can be a misuse if it lacks depth. Those mindful of the celestials are drained of depth in the season of deep thinking. Absolutes are dying at the ivory towers of relative morality. And those who only think with their spirits have been deceived by those who only think with the mind. Faith is devoid of the rational, as the rational is divorced by the faithful. But I can hear the cry of heaven, for the earth to draw strength from the wisdom bank. I hear the lamentation of the master that unless believers think, thinkers will not believe. Could it be our shallow reasoning that is turning thinkers away from the faith? Let's pause our spiritual warfare talk just for 2 seconds. You'll pick it up later. Could it be that people out there have not had a worthy enough conversation to consider faith? Because what you gave them was more fear than conviction. When they asked you about God, you sounded more scared to explore the truth than you were convicted about the truth. Could we be standing in the way of real and true revival? Unless thinkers believe, believers will not think. Once upon a time, believers were thinkers, and thinkers believed. Faith was not devoid of the rational, and the rational was not divorced by the faithful. God is a rational God as well.
Yeah.
God is a thinking God.
Yeah.
He's not random. I'm going to give you guys a challenge. How about the connect groups of ENC Vets? How about you guys run this same conversation in your residence? Approach your house moms, send them the question, say to them, you help them organize different people who can debate one side of the conversation and other people to debate the other side of the conversation and get people talking. Who's in? Please shout out the name of your race so we can see who's represented here. If it ends here, then something is off. How about we take this to the connect groups and we display a picture of courage by saying, let's begin the conversation.
Yeah.
They're not gonna get all the answers in one night. Let's begin the conversation. Maybe your house call is looking for something to do on Saturday. You guys know what's happening on Saturday? Okay, update. Saturday came out. You guys don't know Easter. Your text has about Valentine's. Okay, maybe your rent is looking for something to do. I'll speak to the multimedia team to create a template of a poster that you guys can offer and say, you don't have to make it from scratch. Here's a template. You can make it, or they can even take what we use for today, make it into a poster, put it in your res, have a conversation. Okay, ENC Vets leaders, how about we sponsor a pizza? Let's sponsor some pizzas. Get people to sign up. Let's know how many people they're expecting to show up on Saturday. Let's sponsor pizzas and let people have conversations. Let the people talk.
Yeah.
You guys ready for that?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna call up Pastor L from Every Nation Campus, UJ. She's gonna share some thoughts as we wait for the adjudicators to come back. Other men of God turned down the opportunity to share some thoughts tonight. Everybody know. But some announcements that I want you guys to be aware of is this coming Friday we'll be launching our training, how to train a world changer nights. Those are our leadership trainings, leadership meetings. If you wanna be part of the leadership of ENC Vets this year, please come through on Friday. The venue will be communicated tonight. We'll let you know where it'll be. It's probably gonna be something crazy and out of the box. But please come and let's have the right kind of conversations concerning leadership for 2026. And also, if Connect groups are going to be starting next week, not this week, but if your Connect group has already started, please continue to start. And I would like to also encourage you to continue this conversation in your Connect groups as well. And what else am I missing? Yeah. So I'm going to hand over to Pastor L as the educators finish off. Any questions before Pastor L starts so that she can start by answering your questions? We do have two married people who are going to close off the night tonight to share. So normally with these debates, I try and not kind of support any of the sides of the conversation. And I think I would like to hear what our speakers have to say concerning their personal experiences when it comes to marriage, religion, and culture. So, yeah, views are not views of gay speakers and its partners.
I think my question is to marry or not to marry?
Is the question.
To marry or not to marry?
Marry.
Okay. I think as the two teams were debating, it got to a point where it seemed as though, okay, there's a common ground that, okay, there is oppression that women face, there are pressures that men experience. Both culturally, the picture was painted in terms of Lobola culture, even some African proverbs were quoted as well. And also even in the Christian faith, there was references made. And I think it left me wondering, where did it start? I don't know, for me, where I got stuck was, it didn't start from religion necessarily, or it didn't start from culture, or was there some kind, I think for me that's kind of the question. It's a bit layered. I don't know if it makes sense.
Okay. Do I choose from where to answer? As a pastor or as an academic?
As the one that has a master's inside.
Okay.
From bits.
From okay. If I was doing research for the Brown team, one of the people or research that I would look into is how mothers became defined as the primary caregiver. And it was a policy by government where they could not, I think it was during could be pre-industrial, so with the rise of the industrial age, right? So governments could not afford to pay every single person a salary. So what they devised is we would do a family wage. And so with the family wage, that means that one person in the family has to stay at home and one person has to go to work. So the easiest way to do it is to argue biology, that the person who will most likely, that the child forms temperaments with, or that the child learns life through, is the person through whom the child came to life. Okay, that's number one. Number two is also having to look at how governments in history have actually used the church as an institution to actually control people to perpetuate the propaganda of the day. So I think that's where I would look in terms of how it began. That there are people who found a system that seems to work, or a sacred space like religion or faith, particularly the Christian faith actually. And so you find ways to, I think Marxism does a good job as well of like showing how the church as an institution is adopted by governments to drive about a desired outcome. Okay, is that good? Yeah. And then as a pastor, it really starts in our hearts. The corruption is in my heart. I find God created everything that He created, and He said it is good. And then sin entered into the hearts of men. And what we continue to do, I think, again, just speaking from continue to what I wanted to add, or my thoughts in this, is that as Christians is to not think of ourselves as divorced from the ills that were presented today. I actually perpetuate some of these norms and ways of living. And so what Pastor Neri was saying, that we have to be thinkers. For me, as they were speaking, the scripture that rose up in me is, do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed. by the renewal of your mind, right? To know what is good and perfect will of God. I think I butchered something there, but yeah. And I think for me is thinking about one of the things that I struggled with as a student was an idea of me being a woman in the church and also being black in the church. And so I think during the Black Lives Matter, it's easy to take a position of the oppressed. I should say that also victimhood has a currency. It's easier to come across here as a victim and talk about the oppression that I face as a woman, instead of actually sitting with myself, and this is the question that God asked me during Black Lives Matter. What do you think of yourself? That is what they think of you. What do you think? Can you actually sit and see yourself worthy outside of what they say? And I couldn't. There were things about how I defined who I am as a black woman that were adopted not from scripture, adopted not from the one who made me, but I came into the world exactly like that. So I think for me this is also what for you guys to say, and I think also part of our unbelief as Christians is this, that we allow ourselves to sit with this kind of agreed upon societal arguments, right? That we conclude with the world that indeed marriage is used by the church to oppress women. In what ways do I perpetuate the ideas that society puts on women, even on men? How do I show up in the world? Exactly what Castaneda said, do I actually trust Jesus that when I show up in the presence of the Lord, He sees me as His image bearer? Or do I think that there's something wrong? And this shows up a lot in how you pray, in how you dream with the Lord. That if I think that I am a victim to the systems of this world, I think this is also what I wanted to say. These are creations by society. We create them, by the way. Why we need thinkers is that so psychology, this is how these things work, right? So there's a group of people that decide by themselves that we think that women are inferior in design to men, right? And they all think alike, they all live alike, they do the same thing. No one does anything differently. That's group thinking. So I would need to, and I think guys, this is also why you need to allow the Lord to take you through discipleship. As it is, without peeking, without saying, I'm busy now, I'm not busy, I don't have time. Allow the Lord, allow Him to teach you how to live for Him in a foreign world and foreign culture. You would need to know that indeed He is who He says He is because you have allowed Him. That's how you get transformed in your thinking. Because discipleship is that what Jesus teaches, we obey it every single day. But if I ask you, when you look at yourself, your definition of a man, when you define failure for yourself, when you say cry, you say indola, I hide. Who's your teacher? Who are you following? Does Christ actually say that? And I think for me it's that, like, how can us as a Christian community allow the Lord to actually show us that He indeed, His yoke is easy, His burden is light. We spoke about how the social constructions they do actually can be used as tools of oppression. how can God, do you actually believe what God says or who He says you are? But that does not happen if you want to come into the fold and not allow your thinking to be transformed. Change your thinking. You are not part of, don't allow yourself to just be part of the group without actually testing out the things you think about. Even scripture says that we must test. Is it true? And I think for me that's all I would say, like in terms of where do we move on, like how do I move forward? How I move forward is I allow the scriptures to read me out. And anything that is not of God must be taken out. We are not victims of systems. They're not powerful than us. Going back to my research, I actually studied on how we are able to build different identities in a space where identities are defined a particular way. So it's also possible from a psychological point of view. And I think we have a far better advantage if we were to allow Christ to do His work in us. If He would just transform us. If we would dream differently for families and marriage. And if we just stop idolizing marriage. If we would just stop doing that and just go, Father, what was your main idea? And how can I come into this place as a transformed mind? Okay, that's me.
Adjudicators.
She's gonna speak it. She's speaking before you guys, so after you guys.
No, Mercy's gonna do it.
Okay, Mercy. Okay.
Everybody, please welcome Mercy.
They want me to do it because they don't want you guys to send them weird messages afterwards. You guys are amazing. Can we just give them another? Yeah, so we spoke of just how both teams were just so incredible. You guys are so incredible, and it's so brave to stand up here and to really, like, one of the points we mentioned is just like the research you guys did. Yeah. You know, the points you were making, the sources you were pointing out. Like, that's really, really good because you weren't just speaking your opinion, you brought facts to your cases. And that was really, really amazing. The teamwork, like, we definitely saw that you guys worked with one another. You were not, yes, you re-emphasized each other's points, which is also teamwork. However, like, there's synergy. You could feel the synergy within your points. You know, no one was saying something completely different, you know, to anyone. So well done, guys, on that. You know, things that we think could have been done more. Just remember your tones, right? And also just remember the way that you deliver your arguments. Engage your audience. Look up when you read. A lot of people are reading, if not all of you. And it's just great to look up sometime and try and engage your audience. I'm hoping you had enough time just to believe what you're saying, not literally, especially to you, but like because you are delivering them, you need to make us believe that. And then yeah, we just also believe that a lot of the time the topic wasn't debated. We spoke a lot about marriage, as opposed to culture and religion being a weapon of marriage. And so I think we spoke a lot about the result of marriage as opposed to what both teams, you know, looking at culture and looking at religion and then speaking that. Otherwise, like one of the teams did do like really well on that. Yeah, we've got some points that the team will mention. Is there anything else I've missed out? Okay, great. The one that is